A strange calm enveloped the neighborhood, giving onlookers a false sense of security. Everything seemed peaceful that evening, but it was a deceptive calm, much like the one that precedes a storm. No one knows exactly what happened that night or how it happened, but what is certain and agreed upon is that several innocent lives were brutally taken in cold blood by someone very close to them. This mysterious crime raised many questions. Did the devil possess the killer's body as he claimed? Did someone else help him carry out the crime? Was the house really haunted? No answers were found, and more questions accumulated over the years, turning the mystery into a puzzle that even the world's best investigators couldn't solve. On the evening of November 13, 1974, a young man in his 20s rushed into a bar in the small town of Amityville, New York. He appeared distressed and frightened, quickly drawing everyone's attention as he shouted, "You have to help me. I think my father and mother have been shot." Murders were not common in the quiet, small town, so some bar patrons quickly followed the young man to his home to see what had happened. For a moment, everything inside the house seemed normal. There were no signs of violence or blood. But in one of the bedrooms on the second floor, Ronald DeFeo Sr., 43 years old, and Louise DeFeo, 42 years old, lay in a small pool of blood. They were lying side by side on their bed, apparently killed suddenly while sleeping. In another room on the same floor, two more bodies were discovered. Those of two boys, Mark DeFeo and John DeFeo, who appeared to have been killed in the same way as their parents while they slept. Meanwhile, police cars started arriving at the house, and investigators and forensic experts quickly spread throughout the property. During their search of the remaining rooms, they found two more bodies in another room, two girls, Dawn DeFeo and Allison DeFeo, who were also killed while sleeping. It became clear that the killer had murdered all the members of the DeFeo family except for Ronald DeFeo Jr., the eldest son, who was the one who discovered the crime and ran to the bar for help. During the initial investigation, the police discovered that the killer used a .35 caliber rifle to murder the victims, all of whom were killed while sleeping. The father and mother were each shot twice, while the children were each shot once. Strangely, all the bodies were found lying face down. Ronald DeFeo Jr. was the first person the police interviewed. He claimed he had left the house at 6 a.m. the previous day, spent his day working at his father's car dealership, and then went to his girlfriend's apartment, where he spent some time. During the day, Ronald said he called his parents' house several times, but no one answered, which made him worried. He went to the house at 6 p.m., knocked on the door several times without getting a response, and then entered through a window. When he saw his parents' bodies, he rushed to the bar to seek help. When asked by the police if he suspected anyone, Ronald claimed he suspected a gangster named Louis Fellini, with whom he had previously argued and who had threatened to kill his entire family. In the 2 days following the crime's discovery, the police began questioning the family's neighbors and friends, uncovering some intriguing facts. They learned that Ronald DeFeo Sr. was a domineering and quick-tempered man, while his son, Ronald Jr., was even worse in temperament and behavior. The relationship between father and son was often troubled, marked by numerous violent altercations. Despite their strained relationship, Ronald Sr., who was well off, did not withhold money from his son. The police also discovered that Ronald Jr. was a drug addict, described by some friends as violent and quick to anger, and that he sometimes dealt in firearms. These revelations raised the police's suspicions about Ronald Jr., especially since the investigation clearly showed that the perpetrator knew the DeFeo home well, moving between the victims' rooms without arousing any suspicion. Further fueling their suspicions, the police found two wooden boxes in Ronald Jr.'s room, typically used for storing handguns. One of the boxes was for a .35 caliber pistol, the same type used in the crime. Finally, the autopsy report turned the police's suspicions into an accusation, stating that the DeFeo family members were killed between 2 and 4 a.m. on the night before their bodies were discovered, a time when Ronald Jr. was at home, as he had informed the police that he left the house at 6 a.m. on the morning of the crime. The police quickly arrested Ronald DeFeo Jr. on charges of murdering his family. Initially, he denied all charges and claimed innocence, but when the police pressed him with questions and confronted him with the inconsistencies in his statements, Ronald Jr. buried his head in his hands and said despairingly, "It all happened so fast. Once it started, I couldn't stop." He then confessed to the police how he committed the crime, stating that he first shot his father in the back. When his father, alarmed, tried to attack him, he shot him again in the head. During this, his mother woke up, screaming and pleading, so he shot her in the chest and then in the head. He then went to his brother's room, shooting each of them in the head, and finally to his sister's room, killing them the same way. Afterward, he went downstairs, showered, and left the house, taking his blood-stained clothes and the murder weapon with him to hide them. On October 14, 1975, Ronald DeFeo's trial began. The defense team tried to convince the jury that he was insane and committed the crime without awareness or understanding, claiming that Ronald acted under the influence of a demonic voice that took over his thoughts, repeatedly telling him to kill. However, the insanity plea did not convince the jury, who unanimously found Ronald DeFeo Jr. guilty of murdering all his family members. The judge sentenced him to 150 years in prison, 25 years for each murder. Despite Ronald DeFeo's conviction and imprisonment, most people were unconvinced by his account of how he killed his family members. Many police officers also viewed the case's details with suspicion. The perplexing issue for many was how Ronald DeFeo managed to kill 6 people by himself using a gun without a silencer. How did no one hear the gunshots? The family should have awakened with the first shot he fired at his father. Even if the sound did not reach the other rooms, how did he kill his 2 siblings, who were sleeping in the same room, without either waking up? The same applies to his sisters. Remarkably, there were no signs of resistance, and all the bodies were found face down. How could none of them raise their heads to see what was happening? How could none of them wake up to the sound of a gun being fired in their room? These questions led many to believe that Ronald DeFeo Jr. did not commit the crime alone, and that there was another person or persons who helped him. Additionally, many who examined the case could not understand why Ronald killed his entire family. Everyone knew that Ronald DeFeo Jr.'s relationship with his father was bad and that they often quarreled, so it was not surprising that the son might kill his father. But why kill the rest of the family? Perhaps he killed his mother because she was in the same room, but what drove him to kill his siblings? This is a mystery that remains unsolved to this day. In the years following his conviction, Ronald DeFeo gave several interviews from prison, during which he told conflicting stories about what happened. In one version, he claimed that his mother first shot his father during a quarrel, and he, in a fit of rage, killed her and the rest of the family. In another story, he said he committed the crime in self-defense because his family wanted to kill him. In an interview in the 1980s, Ronald claimed he committed the crime with the help of his sister Dawn and 2 unnamed friends. In this account, Ronald said Dawn's relationship with their father was strained because he restricted her from seeing her boyfriend, which motivated her to agree to kill him. With the help of his friends, he killed his parents, and Dawn, without his knowledge, killed their siblings to prevent them from testifying against them later. This angered him, leading to a fight in her room where he hit her hard, causing her to fall unconscious, and then he shot her in the head. Interestingly, a forensic lab report confirmed the presence of gunpowder on the clothes Dawn wore the night she died, leading some police investigators to believe this story. However, Ronald's confession and conviction in court closed the door to further investigation. The mystery of the DeFeo family murder extends beyond the events of the crime night to the family's house itself. The family who bought the house in 1976 firmly believed it was haunted and that strange events occurred inside. They fled and left the house within 28 days. Others believed the house was haunted by the ghost of a Native American chief who died and was buried near the property long ago. There are other stories and theories, some claiming an illicit relationship between Ronald and his sister Dawn, which led them to kill their parents when their relationship was discovered and strongly opposed. Books and films about the DeFeo family murder have added more mystery and fiction to the case. However, despite everything said and written about the crime, it seems that only God knows exactly what happened on that fateful night.